Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to the launch of the report, Building Back Better, Southeast Asia's Transition to a Green Economy After COVID-19 by the Asean Parliamentarians for Human Rights. My name is Thin and I'll be the moderator for this event. Now, just a few notes on housekeeping before we begin proper. Please remember that this is a public event. It is being live streamed on APHR and the Untitled Thailand's Facebook pages. It is also being recorded, and the recording will be available shortly online after the event for anyone who wanted to attend but couldn't make it. Now, we would also like to be able to identify everyone easily, so please make sure that you are displaying your full name. To do that, you just click on the participants button, you select more next to your name, and then you click rename to make sure that it displays your full name. Please mute yourself if you're not speaking so we can hear the speakers properly. We wouldn't like to mute everyone, but if needed, we will wield that power. Please mute yourself. It's great to have a demonstration of what I was just talking about. Now, during the Q&A portion of the event, if you have a question, please use the raise hand function or type your question in the chat box. And if you, of course, have any technical issues, please message APHR in the chat box. Now, as we all know and have experienced for nearly 2 years now, the COVID-19 pandemic has had devastating impacts on countries all over the world, including in Southeast Asia. And the tragic impacts have not just been in terms of health, but also social and economical. But if there was one silver lining, it is that the pandemic and its subsequent economic recession have revealed the inadequacies of our current economic system. For too long, the system has prioritized business interests over the well-being of people and the environment. It has deepened inequalities and failed to protect the most vulnerable. Now, countries are coming up with measures to recover from the recession, and it is really important that these measures support the type of economic model that is resilient to shocks, that is sustainable in the long run, and one that is just. So in a way, this moment that we're in is an ideal opportunity to break away from the past and make this shift to a fair, resilient, and sustainable system, which is why this report is coming at a perfect time because it focuses on building back better. Now, countries can achieve two key goals with just one stroke: move to a greener economy, which will accelerate your economic recovery, while also cutting greenhouse gas emissions and helping to reduce global warming. And it was to help parliamentarians seize this opportunity that APHR has evaluated recovery measures taken in Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Timor-Leste between February 2020 and April 2021. This assessment helped to identify best practices and green policies that MPs can adopt to promote a transition to a green economy. Now, APHR is also releasing a toolkit, as you can see on the screen, to support MPs in their efforts to promote this transition. The toolkit and the executive summary of the report are available in all ASEAN languages on APHR's website. So this webinar is an occasion to present the research findings and introduce concrete measures that have been and can be adopted to promote a green economic recovery in Southeast Asia. And let me just give you a rundown of what we can expect this afternoon. First, we will have a presentation on the opportunity of building back better by YB Charles Santiago, the Member of Parliament from Malaysia. This will be followed by MP Kumpita Lim Jarongrat from Thailand, who will be talking about how to promote a green recovery in Southeast Asia. Last, but definitely not the least, we have Ibu Mercy Barrett, an MP from Indonesia, and she'll be giving an assessment of Southeast Asia's transition to a green economy. This is going to be followed by a Q&A session with the speakers, and then we will end today's webinar with closing remarks from Dr. Axel Newbird, who is the resident representative for the Hans Seidel Foundation. Now, let me welcome our first speaker, YB Charles Santiago, who is a Malaysian Member of Parliament for Klang constituency in Selangor for the Democratic Action Party, or DAP for short. YB Charles have been an MP now for 13 years. He is also chair of APHR and a founding member of the Global Alliance for a Green New Deal. He'll be talking about the opportunity of building back better. So without much further ado, sir, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Tin, for that kind introduction. Let me just begin by welcoming all of us who are in the webinar. This very interesting and important effort by the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights on building back better the role of MPs in transitioning to a green economy after COVID-19. So once again, welcome. And the focus of our webinar and also the purpose of this project is to look at the role of MPs in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN, the role we can play in helping to transition to a green economy, especially after the COVID pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. So in some sense, we are making history, and I think it's the first effort at the regional level in order to push for a transitioning where members of parliament are involved in a very personal way through our standing committees, through our select committees, and through our speeches and intervention in parliament in order to ensure a smooth transitioning from fossil fuels to renewable energy. I will talk today about the importance and advantages of seizing this opportunity of building back better and enacting a green recovery on the COVID-19 pandemic. But first, why are we talking about building back better? Why are we talking about building back better? Because the COVID-19 pandemic and its subsequent economic recession have revealed the failure and the vulnerability of our economic system. You don't have to go very far in a country like Malaysia at this very moment. Lots and lots of Malaysians, thousands of Malaysians are having one meal a day, which is a fried rice and an egg on top of the fried rice. That's what the families are eating, including poor children are eating the same food. People have to make, people have lost jobs, people have lost their income, some unable to pay rent, and we can go on with that though. So it shows how the system has failed, and why there's a need to build back better, It has shown that our system has prioritized business interests over people and the environment, and how it deepened inequalities and totally failed to protect the most vulnerable in this time of crisis. In a short while, I'm going to debate in the Malaysian Parliament, a debate that has been going on for some time, where I've argued that even in the time of crisis, the inequality in Malaysia has worsened. It's really worsened. I mean, you would expect some kind of ceasefire on inequality, but in the case of Malaysia, in a time of a crisis, you actually have inequality increasing. Shifting towards a green economy is an essential part of building back better. So an important question to ask now is, what is green recovery, otherwise known as a low-carbon economic recovery? But more simply, it is the adoption of measures that aim to accelerate economic recovery while also cutting greenhouse emissions and helping to reduce global warming. It involves introducing measures that shift away from fossil fuels, dependent industries such as oil, coal, and gas, instead more towards clean and renewable energy such as solar power, geothermal power, and wind power and hydropower. And what are the benefits of initiating a green economy? Firstly, and most importantly, it will help limit global warming, something we are already feeling and the effects of that in Southeast Asia. Philippines is a good example of that. Malaysia is a good example of that. In fact, our region is regarded as one of the most vulnerable in the world to the impact of climate change. And if we continue to in our current path, this will threaten our access to food, to water, and other natural resources. The likely outcome of this would be heightened conflicts, poverty, and pandemics across our region. Our leaders have acknowledged this, and the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework from COVID-19, and which was finalized in November last year, recognizes that climate change represents a fundamental risk to ASEAN, and that actions to mitigate the impacts of climate change should be taken now, immediately and urgently. It is, of course, not such a regional issue, but a global one. And the scientific consensus couldn't be clearer that time is running out for us to take action to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. This is particularly timely discussion to be having ahead of the Global Climate Change Conference, or COP26, which will begin in Scotland in late October. As a result, it's crucial that we as parliamentarians, as elected by people, people's representatives, push forward policies that enhances green recovery. It will also be a win-win for us here in the region, because it will help us to recover quicker from the pandemic, as well as build an economy that is more resilient. In fact, by keeping global temperatures well below 2 degrees Celsius, experts have calculated that ASEAN could avoid a 25% drop in its GDP by end of the century. In addition, using funds from the respective COVID-19 recovery package to mitigate climate risk can help prevent the unsustainable rise in the country's debt levels when responding to crises that are caused by climate change, such as typhoons, floods, and pandemics. What's more, the Asian Development Bank estimates that capital expenditure of $172 billion in key climate-friendly areas, such as clean energy, can create 30 million jobs in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN, by 2030. It is crucial that we act with absolute urgency on this issue. The scientific consensus couldn't be clearer that human activities are the main cause for climate change, which is one of the gravest threats to the natural environment, human rights, and peace. As I've already mentioned, its impacts are already being felt every day. You can feel it, we can cut it and take it home. That's how the situation is. That's how the impact is. And are already leading to devastating consequences for people. Not only do they exacerbate the spread of disease, but also threaten serious issues such as food security and key infrastructure. And if left unchecked, will push millions more people into poverty, hunger, and displacement. To recover from the recession caused by the pandemic, countries are now adopting recovery measures to boost their economy. The type of economic model these measures will support is crucial in shaping the future. And this moment presents an ideal opportunity to break away from the past and shift towards a more just, sustainable, and a resilient economy. So far, our governments in Southeast Asia have fallen drastically behind when it comes to the commitments under the Paris Agreement. The evidence is there for all of us to see. The evidence is there for all of us to see that urgent action is needed as soon as possible, ASAP, for us to change course. And I urge everyone who's joining us today, particularly MPs, members of parliament, elected representatives, senators, to do everything we can to urge our governments to invest in smarter policies for a green transition. With that, I thank you and thanks for your attention. Over to you, Tim.
Thank you very much, YB Charles, for taking time off from debating in the Parliament to join us, and also for emphasizing the cost of inaction, what it means if we don't take action now, what it would mean for not just the region's economy, but also everything else. I would now like to invite Kunpita Limjaronrat from Thailand, who will be talking about how to promote a green recovery in Southeast Asia. Now, Kunpita is not only the leader of Move Forward Party, but he is also a well-known entrepreneur with a lot of private sector experience under his belt. And he has ran a very successful company for at least a decade before becoming an MP. Kunpita?
Thank you for the introduction. Mr. Santiago, Ms. Behrens, Dr. Newbert, Ms. Din Lewin, participants, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen from various countries who are right here with us today. Let me begin by thanking the APHR and the Hans Sydel Foundation for giving me the opportunity to speak today on the topic of how to promote green recovery in Southeast Asia. This topic could not be more relevant to Thailand today. I'm speaking to you live on the road from the northern part of Thailand, a country where half of the nation is paralyzed by flood. 70,000 homes have already been impacted. No one can deny the role of climate change in our society is already experiencing the enormity of the growing environmental challenges, that's for sure. I know that our time is limited, so to keep this conversation as effective, as concise, and crisp as possible, there are three things I want to discuss with you today, which are the why, the where, and the what. First, why the green economic recovery is not only vital, but a necessity to the economic life of Southeast Asia. Second, where are we now? Where is Thailand and the ASEAN region in this road of green recovery? And the third, the what. What can we do and what Thailand can do and must do to address the challenges. So let me start off with the why. When we talk about the green recovery, we are talking about a recovery from the economic recession resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. Last year, the entire ASEAN's GDP contracted by about 5%. For Thailand, the GDP contracted by about 6.1. Malaysia, it's 5.6. Singapore, 5.4. Indonesia, 2.1. The Philippines, 9.5. If we fail this green economic recovery, the economic devastation from COVID-19 will be minuscule compared to the potential economic devastation from the climate crisis would cost. According to research done by the Swiss reinsurance company, the world's largest reinsurance company, if we can't slow down climate change, and the world is on pace to get warmer than 3 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial level, Thailand's cumulative GDP loss as a result of climate change is estimated to be 48% by 2048. For Singapore, that number would be 47. For Malaysia, that number would be 46. For Indonesia, it's 40. And for the Philippines, the GDP will contract by 46% if climate change is 3 degrees Celsius. On the other hand, if the world succeeds in limiting climate change to keep it below 2 degrees Celsius, according to the Paris Agreement, the Thailand's GDP's loss of Thailand and Singapore and Malaysia as a result of climate change will go down to only 5% in 2014. That's 48 to 5. For Indonesia, it will be 4. For the Philippines, the loss will be only 6%. Comparing the GDP loss of only 5% to the almost 50%, the green recovery is not a choice. The inaction is not an option. Initiating a green recovery would have huge benefits for our region. Not only would it help limit global warming, but it would also help us recovering quicker from the pandemic, as well as building a more resilient economy. That was my first point. Now to the second point, the where. Where are we today in terms of combating climate change? The current status of it. I think the answer depends on who you ask. As a sample for Thailand, if you ask the government would say that we're on pace to decrease greenhouse gas emissions by more than 20%, from the business as usual level. However, if you ask an independent third-party evaluator like Climate Action Tracker, the existing policies are deemed, in their own words, critically inefficient That will lead towards a temperature increase of 4 degrees Celsius, and that would be very bad. The evaluator suggests that Thailand's policies and actions reflect minimal to no action and are not at all consistent with the Paris Agreement. To keep climate change below 2 degrees Celsius and avoid economic collapse, the world, including Thailand, as well as Asean, has to cut emissions in half by 2030 and achieve net zero emission by 2050. Lastly, my third point is the what. What we must do to stop this crisis. First thing first, we need a better plan to significantly increase a more diverse renewable energy mix. The current plan is that Thailand will increase the renewable energy consumption to about 30% by 2037. This is far from enough, and we must do more. A key concern of renewable energy is fluctuation. Someday the sun does not shine or the wind does not blow, However, the International Renewable Energy Agency here in Thailand definitely can do more than double the amount of renewable energy mix without any energy fluctuation. We can start that off with solar energy, and the magic number is 1.5%. To realize our potential in solar, we need to cover 1.5% of Thailand's land area with solar panels that could generate 8 times of the total consumption of electricity of Thailand today, for example. Another thing that we have to do is to set an agenda to get Thailand into a net zero emission country. Our natural resource capacity is ready. And what we lacked is the political will to make it so. The lawmakers lie at the heart of fulfilling climate change commitments, whether that's through our role in pushing progressive legislation, overseeing national budgets, or in our mandate to be the voice of our constituents who will be the worst affected by climate change if no action is taken. There are also a number of interesting policies that ASEAN countries can learn from one another. The Build Back Better report we're discussing today, for example, Indonesia and the Philippines issued tax reductions for industries and SMEs adopting renewable energy projects. Singapore put in place tax rebates for electric vehicle owners during the pandemic. Pakistan, while not an ASEAN example, approved a green stimulus for the unemployed to earn income from green jobs such as planting trees and improving water sanitation. In conclusion, taking from what we have learned from this current pandemic, we can see the global challenges require a massive collaboration. Shutting down the borders may have temporarily reduced or postponed the spread of COVID-19, but the climate crisis continues across our borders. The country must treat the climate crisis as a clear and present danger, begin preparing long-term data-driven cross-sector planning. And what we have to start now is a strategy to get to net zero emission. I would like to definitely offer my commitment as a parliament member of Thailand to work together with other parliamentary in ASEAN to ensure that this transnational challenge is met with transnational cooperation. And that would be it for me. Thank you very much for your time.
ขอบคุณมากนะคะคุณพีตา for that very
Your Thai is perfect.
Thank you for that very convincing argument on why we need to act and how we can do so using Thailand as an example. And you know, those numbers that you mentioned about economic losses from climate change if nothing is done are staggering.
The numbers are unbelievable, you know, the way that if we act on it now, or if we postpone it and the time of value of money hits in, it's like 5% or 50%. So we're definitely at a crossroads now.
No, thank you for you know, bringing those to light, and I hope that others, you know, thank you for your commitment to work on this, and I hope
Yes,
that other MPs in, you know, in here would
the consequence of inaction is very real. It's actually right off my window right now. You know, the amount of storm water flood that comes through our region. You know, 70,000 homes being paralyzed by the country. So I think the people, regardless of gender, regardless of occupation, they're starting to realize it, internalizing it in their daily lives. That's for sure.
Yeah, thank you. And regardless of political affiliation, right? That's the kind of thing that you need cross-party and bipartisan work on dealing with this. So again, Kopo Manaka. May I now welcome Ibu Mercy Barons, who is serving her second term in the Indonesian House of Representatives. Now, Ibu Mercy is from the Indonesian Democratic Party of Struggle, and she is a big proponent of a green transition and women's empowerment. Now, Ibu Mercy will be giving an assessment of Southeast Asia's transition to a green economy. Ibu Mercy?
Okay, thank you very much, Tin. Alice, could you please show my presentations? Okay, during we wait, Alice show the presentations. I would like to express my highly appreciations for this green webinar. I think this is the first time for the APHR to run like green assessments as impacts of the pandemic COVID engaged to the how to tackling the carbon emissions reductions. So this is my presentations. Thank you very much. Also, I give my greetings for Dr. Edson Newbert, residents representatives from Hans Seidel Foundation to support these assessments. Also for MPs, Kun Pita, Lamjarun Rat from Thailand, and the other participants. Okay, we have got many informations, whether from Charles or from Pita, and the other information from the other resources related with the impact of the climate change and what will we do as a parliament's members. So maybe the next. Okay. So based on the assessments related with the pandemic of COVID-19, I think it could be like a turning point for integrated recovery based on the green and sustainable developments. As we know that the pandemic has created a widely shock throughout the world, disruptions for both economic and social spheres, supply and demand sides, change fundamentally ratio between apparatus and public spending budgets, and governments has implemented a set of policies to accelerate the recovery process of the pandemic. And the situation, I think, respective country and governments have a set of policy how to tackling based on the characteristic of respective countries in Asian regions. Indeed, based on the assessment in 6 Asian countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Timor-Leste, has figured out that in responding to the pandemic, government take a sort of shortcut policy, because in the emergency situation and shock situation, so they cut many things of the bureaucracy to take the policy making. and how to tackling emergency situation using apostrophe less the measures of green development standard properly. Even though not every year the lawmakers put a lot of efforts in short time by involving a large national budget for a such of recovery policy. It's a rare time. Actually, it can be like a golden or multiplier opportunity, not only for pandemic recovery itself, but we can use it beyond to generate the development system and public service in green, just, and sustainable principle all at once. Next. Based on the assessment, it showed that in South Asia, a pandemic recovery with just a hint, maybe a small hint, because maybe one or two countries in Asian country have put a lot of attentions related with how to engage the pandemic recovery all at once with the green development or low carbon the development initiative policy. So only minimal green policy measures have been adopted as part of the COVID-19 recovery in Southeast Asia, despite Southeast Asia being one of the most at-risk regions in the world from the impacts of climate change, and government has so far failed to capitalize on the opportunity to build back better for the COVID-19 pandemic. I think because the situation's getting worse in the emergency situation last year. So I think that the government's tackling the situation in the emergency psychology among the government's system. So maybe they didn't put a lot of requirements, proper requirements for the recovery process in Asian regions. Many have instead used their COVID-19 recovery packages to enact policies that contribute to global warming and create major barriers to a low carbon economic transitions. Next. So this is to a point of view as a focal point, yeah, or driving forces. First, a critical lack of coherent strategy together towards a green economic transitions. Where is the potential environmental gains from the few green recovery measures adopted, while likely be significantly counteracted by the fact that countries mostly adopted policy that directly contribute to heightened emissions. For example, in Indonesia, in the pandemic situation, we have a national economic recovery, and we put a lot of money, especially for the energy subsidies. They pay the electricity, or we can give them a discount or free for some scheme of the electricity consumers. And we know that 85% of our power plants in Indonesia comes from fossil fuel. This is for example. The second, run contrary to Asian own commitments to urgently transition to clean energy and mitigate the impacts of climate change. So in the Asian Comprehensive Recovery Framework, Southeast Asian governments recognize that climate change represents a fundamental risk to Asian. Based from Charles statements or Kunpita statements, that if we can tackling or handle the climate change risk properly with the specific requirement based on the UN FCC standards, so I think maybe detrimental impacts will be happens in Asian regions. Maybe many poor people will be increased, reduce our gross income, etc. Next. So what can parliamentarians do? It is not too late, yet the window of opportunity to change course is quickly closing, and the need to introduce policies for the good of the planet and the region is as urgent as it ever has been. So before it's too belated, so we have to take critical movement to tackling the impact of the climate change situation in Asian regions. Lawmakers must put it into the heart and minds of fulfilling climate change commitments, whether to pushing progressive legislations, overseeing national budgets, oversight of green and development policy to be implemented on the track, in being the voice of their constituents who will be the worst affected by climate change if no action is taken. And the last, parliamentary diplomacy to strengthen the collaborations and solidarity on green development among MPs in region countries or throughout the world. Next. So this is a simple flow chart. We have several functions in parliaments. Green budget. We have a function like budget functions, legislation function, oversight functions, diplomacy functions, and constituency functions. So how to translate this function into the green development and green policy? So we can name it green budget, green legislation, green oversight, green diplomacy interparliamentary, green voice to vulnerable constituents. And the next slide, maybe I can derive some points of view related with the functions. For green policy or legislation, what can parliamentarians do? First, use APHR report Building Back Better. So all of us can access this report, and it's a good reference for us. Although as a newcomers in this issue, maybe we can work together and get the insights related with some points of green development or local low carbon developments initiative policy in respective parliaments. So there's Asia transition to a green economy after COVID-19 to promote the adoptions of the green recovery policy mentioned above. The second, maybe we can push green bills in the parliament's legislation mechanism, such as ratify Paris Agreement into the national law. The second, renewable energy bill, carbon tax bill, etc., etc. In Indonesia, in this year, we have 4 green bills among 50 bills in our national legislation programs, named Renewable Energy Bill, Carbon Tax Bill in Commission 7. We call it National Tax Management, and including carbon tax details. In Commission 4, we have another one green bill named ocean conservation or sea conservation or something like that. How to handle the whole problem and situation related with the maritime exploitations of fishery, coastal problems, mangrove problems related with these bills. The second, urge your government to submit more ambitious NDC targets to the Paris agreements in specific sectors, example, energy, forestry, industry, and support transportations, agriculture, waste management, based on the situation of respective country compatible with the target of greenhouse gas reductions to be fulfilled in the Paris agreements. Maybe I can say something like some points like that for energy, forestry, industry, transportation, agriculture, waste management, we have to have a clear database related with the how worse the climate change impact our nation or impact our country. And among the targets to NDC, we have to verify which one of the sector give the biggest or as the big one to give or to contribute the biggest carbon emissions to be reduced. In Indonesia, the first is land use change and forestry, and the second is energy. We stated in the NDC unconditionally 2030, 29%, and 11% comes from energy. So in Commission 7, I work in Commission 7, work hard in Commission 7, how to reduce the emission carbon, engage to fulfill the Paris Agreement based on our NDC documents. And in energy, maybe I can add, we move forward with several strategies. First, how to substitute the primary energy, because this is the transition. This is the transitions phase. We can directly switch our hand from the fossil fuel to the new renewable energy. So for the substitute primary energy, we develop biofuel, how to blending the diesel fuel with biofuel. Now we have a B30, 70 diesel fuel and 30 biofuel. The second, we develop co-firing for a steam power plants with biogas or biomass. The third, we converse the power plant for fossil fuel resource to new renewable energy directly from geothermal energy, from hydro energy, from photovoltaic, solar energy, etc., etc. The third is we develop large-scale program of solar or photovoltaic, like rooftop photovoltaic program in many of our government's office and public office. The second is floating photovoltaic in a lake or a dam or something like that, and related with the how to develop integrated photovoltaic or solar photovoltaic, solar panel power plant in rural area, not based on the household, but based on a village, a huge 1 hectare, 2 hectare, and yeah, it's covered with the panel of photovoltaic, something like that.
Ibu Mercy, I'm so
yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. There are people who want to ask questions for Q&A, so it would be great if you can wrap it up in the next couple of minutes. Thank you so much.
Okay. So the third, promote investment in natural infrastructure in green spaces to avoid potential damages from climate-related disasters, such as floods and etc. Use parliamentary committees and debates to mainstream climate issue and the benefits of a green economy. The next, for green budget, I have five points. First, develop a climate change financial framework, green budget tagging, not in national, but in subnational level budgets. The second, fossil fuel subsidy reform to reduce gradually or halt the fossil fuel subsidy, shifting and prioritize budget allocation to renewable energy, research and development, public transportations, energy efficiency, etc. Raise the environmental and human rights cost of coal developments and other environmental harmful policies. Create and promote green bond for green investments. And the last, carbon tax to trading and non-trading mechanism, carbon cap trading, carbon tax, offset carbon incentive, etc. Next. So for green oversights, we can do something like oversight on implementations of policies, law, regulation, budget spending, comply to the target of NDC. This is the role of MP. The second is strengthen the transparency, accountability, and participation publicly to ensure the governments executes policies and budget comply to green budget tagging. And the third, engage public monitoring to ensure a green recovery work in no harm of environment and human rights. Next. And for Green Voice for vulnerable constituents, maybe we can do something like promote meaningful civic participation to ensure a green recovery that supports individual human rights. Second, meet constituents to understand their most urgent climate concerns and raising this to the governments. Third, public campaign through various social medias above or below the line to share green messages publicly to increase the awareness of the related parties and mass community. And the last is develop networking and solidarity with multi-stakeholders to raise one voice, that is to put the people at the center of green and sustainable development. If contrary means violations of human rights. The last, this is the last functions of MP is green parliamentary diplomacy. So we can actively contribute in Global Parliamentary People Forum, IPU, EU Parliaments, IPAC, EU Asian People Forum, Asia Pacific People Forum, and another global parliamentarian call, etc., to increase the global solidarity on green developments. The second is develop inclusive networking to the international or regional agency, example, UN agency, Asian agency, national, subnational, academia, private sectors, NGO, etc., for sharing knowledge, transfer, skill, and technology, capacity building, tackling the issue, transnational green issues in Asian region, etc. So that is the last slides. We can join signing the parliamentarian call for fossil fuel ahead for COP26 in Glasgow. You can add your voice in this link for parliamentarian call. And I think maybe we can work hand in hand in solidarity, green solidarity for green developments. Thank you.
Terima kasih banyak, Ibu Mercy, for that comprehensive assessment and recommendations on what MPs can do in terms of practical actions to bring about this green transition. Now, before we open up for questions, I just want to remind everyone that if you would like to ask a question, you can raise your hand using the raise hand function, or send your questions via chat box. Unfortunately, due to some unforeseen circumstances, YB Charles and Kumpita are unable to join us for the Q&A, but we have Ibu Mercy, who you just heard from, to respond to questions. And we also have Kun Kasid Piromya. Yes, Kun Kasid Piromya, a Democrat Party.
Thank you for joining now.
A Democrat Party politician and former foreign minister of Thailand, who is also a board member of APHR, who will be joining Ibu Mercy in answering your questions. Again, just before we open up, we would also like to be able to go through as many questions as possible and allow insights from different countries. So we would really appreciate it if you could keep your questions or reflections short and concise, because otherwise I am afraid I will have to cut you off. Now, I see that Kun Apichai has raised their hands. Kun Apichai, could you take the floor, please? Thank you. Kopamanaka.
Thank you very much. Very interesting forum. Since this is a parliamentarian-oriented discussion, in many countries in ASEAN, we are coming up to election. I think soon. You can count a few already. So is there a way at ASEAN level now to put this on the agenda of the parliamentary, in other words, the political parties that are going into elections, they would have to state their platform or agenda on, addressing climate or just environmental sustainability, okay? So that then the electorate can know what political parties' positions are, okay? So I'm even, tempted to already, name a a caucus, yeah, just like your APHR, yes, it's ASEAN Parliamentary for Human Rights. I would say ASEAN Parliamentary Alliance for Climate or Sustainability, or APHR, or something like that. You know, I mean, it's something like this. Right now, everybody in ASEAN is very, uptight or whatever about this AUKUS and Quad or whatever, about submarines. And very little I hear that, if we don't do anything much, many of our capital cities and major cities would be submerged by 2040 or 2050, right? So, don't worry about submarines. We will be living, in the underwater anyway. So you either take care of your own house now, or you'll be underwater anyway. All right. Thank you very much.
ขอบคุณมากนะคะคุณอภิชัย Before I ask Ibu Mercy and Kun Kasit to respond, I would like to just pick a second question as well, and perhaps you could, reflect on the first question from Kun Apichai while listening to this as well, and you can perhaps answer them both. One is, there's a question that is coming in from Miss Anna Skodon from the Global Renewables Congress, who asked that, in many countries like the Philippines, we see a transition away from coal, but rather than looking at renewables for economic growth, there seems to be a favoritism towards gas. Why is that? So there are two questions. One is, what Kun Apichai asked about in terms of with the elections coming up and perhaps a new caucus, and how to, I guess, mobilize and motivate more MPs to take this up as an election platform. And a question on, instead of looking at renewable energy, why are some countries in Southeast Asia, moving away from coal but looking at gas? Perhaps could I ask Ibu Mercy, could you just briefly perhaps take 2-3 minutes to respond, and then I would ask Kun Kasit to respond to that as well. That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Theng. Related with the Kun Apichai comments before that, first related with the political will as candidates in the elections process. I think maybe it's related with the situations in the constituency area. If the constituency area is related with like archipelago, or related like continental area, it's very different how to tackling and create like a campaign issue. But the point of view is, we as MPs candidate, we must stand on. We must stand on for the climate change issue, because its impact for all countries, especially for countries in archipelago perspectives, like in Asian countries, because consists of 1,000 or hundreds of islands, and it's getting worse if we can get the how to tackling the issue in emergency actions. The second, it's related with why the other countries start or begin to switch their energy using from fossil fuel to renewable energy. So it's first is depend on the political will and mindset among the policymakers. The second is related with how we can translate the low carbon initiative development policy into the parliamentarian mechanism, political mechanisms. So we have to lobbying, we have to consultation, coordination, looking for the champions, because not many MPs want to work hard for this issue. That's right. This is the fact. So this is the political barrier. The third is related with how we set up or we crafting the policy and the budget issue. First, related with the policy, we have to translate the NDC in Paris Agreement into the midterm or long-term national planning. The second, we have to translate the policy-making documents into the budget planning, national planning, subnational, and provincial, and in district, sub-district, etc. This is the change. This is the change of policy making budget allocation, how we have to work to make it happen to reduce the carbon emission. The third, how to engage the same champions to work and debate in every times and use the green analysis in every we take the decision making in parliaments. It's a principle, because when we don't know our battle, it's very hard how to make the green policy and the green budget put into the national planning, and it will be happen in action plan, obviously. And I think the last things related with the how to sweep the renewable energy, we have to clear planning related with how many fossil fuel power plant we have now, and for the first step, middle step, and the long term, how many effort we have to do to switch to the renewable energy. It's a lot of effort, a lot of money. So we have to set up in a roadmap clearly, so everyone can use it as a guide for us. I think something like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ibu Mercy. And hopefully this report that's being launched today will act as some guide in helping MPs to sort of navigate some of those more difficult issues around trying to get this into the national action plans. Kun Kasid, first of all, Kopu Manaka for agreeing to stand in at the last minute for the Q&A. We really appreciate it. And secondly, would you like to respond? Take 4 or 5 minutes to respond to the 2 questions.
Thank you very much. APHR can disseminate the report as well as the conclusion of this particular online meeting to all political parties in ASEAN as well as in Timor-Leste. So we can act as the sort of the I think center of information. That's the first point. Second, we can also approach APHR, ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly, to submit this finding and to urge APHR to take up this particular issue. And third, we can also write, and I do agree with Ibu Mercy, to all the economic planning agency of each of the ASEAN governments and as well as East Timor, for them to incorporate the green economic recovery post-COVID into their respective 5-year socio-economic development plan. That's the first answer. Second, both the Philippines and Thailand are net importers of gas and oil. And each year, I think we spend, billions and billions of US dollars to import gas and oil. But at the same time, our 2 countries have plenty of sun, sea, and air, and mountains. So instead of spending billions and billions of US dollars as what we have been doing the past 50 years, we should divert that money and put all of it into the renewable and alternative energy, especially the wind and the solar. And I think within 5 or 10 years, we could increase the electrification based on solar energy, or to completely replace oil and gas by at least 80%. What it needs, like Ibu Mercy has said, is the political vision and the political will. And somehow, in the case of Thailand, the gas and the oil lobby have been, controlling the political direction of successive government. So there must be the declaration of independence from the oil and gas industry, pure and simple. Thank you.
Kun Kasit, if I could just follow up on your answer as well. And Ibu Mercy, in her earlier answer, she sort of talked about, how it is really difficult to take up this issue for parliamentarians. Perhaps some of it is a lack of, awareness and information. Perhaps some of it is also a lack of political will. But also, both YB Charles and Kun Pita have also talked about how, our region is the most at risk from climate change, and it is taking so long, to shift our economies into green policies. What do you think needs to change? I mean, you're a veteran politician and diplomat. I mean, what do you think needs to change in this region to actually make that push?
I think Kun Pita is the leader of his own party. So he should be able to convince his members, and to come out with this green recovery policy. At the same time, Charles is a senior member of the Democratic Action Party of Malaysia. So I think we have to urge each of the political party leader to put this into their policy platform for the campaign. I think for the Philippines, I place a lot of hopes on the Liberal Party of the Philippines for the upcoming presidential elections, I think in May. And I could work with them and also with the councils of Asian liberals and Democrats to have all the political party members put the question of a green economy in their party's respective political platform. And I think we have to keep on educating the public at the same time. And this is where I think APHR can come into the picture. So it's a continuous process of educating the public, drawing them, awakening them, and have them, I think, to support this green economic thing. There is no other route. Otherwise, we will be killing ourselves with the emission and so on. And most of all, or practically all of our coastal plains will be flooded if we do not really, I think, have a strong policy. And one addition, I think there should be also an ASEAN-wide regional plan, master plan on the prevention of further deforestation of the forest and the mangrove, and to do reforestation of the mangroves and all the, I think, watersheds up the hills all over Southeast Asia. This must be a sort of the ASEAN agenda for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so that's essentially, a two-pronged approach, right? Sort of raising awareness among the constituents, among the voters, and while also raising awareness and having political leadership among the politicians, particularly leaders of political parties and senior members, to really push through on both sides. While we're waiting for more questions to come in, I have one more question to the both of you. I mean, what is your advice for both politicians and civil society who want to help, who want to be part of this transition? What can they do to bring about that change? If they're not, let's say, a party leader, but they're just part of the party. What advice would you give to politicians as well as civil society on how they can bring about this change?
I think we have to change the mindset. Most of politicians and most of the political parties, and especially when they become the government, they seem to have the mindset that the civil society organizations are the enemies of the state. So we have to change that mindset. And for all politicians and all political parties and whatever is the existing government, to look at the NGO, CSO, as partners in the socio-economic development of each country and also of ASEAN as a whole. I think this cordial relationship between political parties and politicians and the NGOs, I think, have already taken place in European countries such as the Netherlands. So there have been a lot of joint projects and activities between political parties and NGO, because there have been now the mutual recognition of the respective roles in the enhancement of the sustainability of the development of each particular country. So we have to reach out, I think, politicians, and APHR lately have been also working with many of the regional level NGOs. So the changing of the mindset, the reaching out and trying to work together. I think APHR will be having one joint project with the Councils of Asian Liberals and Democrat CAL based in Manila on the question of business and human rights pertaining to the local small fishermen along the coast of all Southeast Asian countries, including East Timor. That is to work together to prevent the basic livelihood of the small Indonesian or the Malaysian fishermen against the big business of trawlers, and fishing fleet and so on that have been destroying the environment, the nature beneath the sea level and so on. So this will be a starting point, and we cannot, work only among political parties in the context of APHR or CAL, but we have to reach out to the communities and especially to the NGOs involved in the basic livelihood and human rights of ordinary fishermen and small farmers. Thank you.
Ibu Mercy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I can add some points of view related with how we analyze the anatomy of the global economy nowadays. That the situation is very unbalanced between the developed countries and developing countries. And many of developing countries to be like a marketplace for the developed countries like China, US, America, etc. So for the first, I want to raise some point related to the free trade agreements. How Asian region, how to dealing with the free trade agreements or bilateral investment treaties, because maybe we are the players, economic players, but in this, it's not the same field and the same level. So how we have to treatment and dealing with situation when we face the China with the bank constructions of China with the huge capitalists, US and another European countries. So I think maybe we can protect our country with a set of legislations, how to translate into the national law. So we can protect our poor people in the, we call it in the fields, like fishermen, farmers, etc., etc. The second, related to the free trade agreement and bilateral investment treaty, in every negotiation, we have to ensure as MPs how to put the, what we call it, human rights impact assessment and environmental impact assessment binding with the UN convention, whatever the names, and human rights conventions, trading standards, etc., etc., because it's related with the human rights issues in the low levels. And the third is related with how we treatment the globalists or capitalists when come with the large capital to our country. In one side, we want to increase the economic growth, but in the other side, we face the problem with the environmental issue. How to engage? We can get the increase our economic growth, but in the other side, we can protect our environmental situation. So for that issue, I think we must tackling this issue, what we call it, prudently, and several policy, regulations, law, and for the budget, we call it in Indonesia. Now we have a climate change, a financial framework budget mechanism. The second, we develop derived from the climate change financial system is a green carbon tagging in national level and in subnational level per nomenclature, per item nomenclature in all sectors. So we know how to we tackling the impact of the large investment issue, how to grab when we face the problem related with the grabbing land issue, how to we tackling the issue. For example, we have to use land reform mechanism or something like that. and the last is related with how to remove the oligarchy. Oligarchy is the big problem, because many fundamental development process created by the oligarchy systems. So how to cut the oligarchy from national to the subnational level. So we engage the participation from people, private sectors, locally, etc., and many other stakeholders. So the country or our constituency area cannot develop by oligarchy power, 1 or 2 or 3 elites only, but we can develop in equally just and in green developments with inclusive participation, substantive participation, gender issue, etc. I think something like that.
Thank you. I've got a couple more questions, so I'm going to go through them. So, both Ibu Mercy and Kun Kasit can listen, and then we will ask for the response. So the first question, well, there are 2 questions from Masya Hadayani. And the first question is targeted towards you specifically, Ibu Mercy. It says, agree with you that NDCs should be translated on National Development Plan, and that it should be a strive to achieve low carbon development. But how could MPs and legislators monitor this implementation and the NDC? So that's a question directly at you. And then the second part of the question is to, I think, both of you. We have seen, I think, in the latest Global Witness reports as well, that activists who defend their land and the environment and demand a green recovery, they're being, they're coming under attack. They're facing threats and worse, and this number seems to be rising in ASEAN. How can APHR or MPs can help tackle this issue? So that's 2 questions. And the last one is from Antonius Aditanjo. I do apologize if I'm mangling your names. And his question for both of you is, what's your personal view on the importance of public participation to this transition? And to what extent are the parliaments committed to green legislation, in the next 5 years? So first question, just to Ibu Mercy on the NDCs. And then 2 more questions on both of you. One is on environmental and land right defenders, how APHR and MPs can help, and the importance of public participation and whether parliaments are really, interested in green legislation. Kun Kasit, would you like to go first, since Ibu Mercy just now answered?
I think APHR has been active in protecting the rights defenders, even I think protection of the land ownership and so on, against the encroachment of agricultural estates. And I think about 4 years ago, Charles San Diego led a small delegation of APHR. I was included to Brussels, and we went to see the EU Commission, and we did have a chance to speak to the European Parliament, in Brussels, raising the issue of the sugar plantation or the contract farming in Laos, Cambodia, and Thailand, and so on. The big business from the region and from the outside have been investing in the sugar plantation. So we went to Europe to inform and to alert the European legislators that they should look at the what you call the sugar importation. That the sugar importation by the major international company like Tetline, did that type of sugar come from the land area in Southeast Asia, whereby the communities and the farmers were being kicked out from their land that they have been living for generations and being given away to the big business, agricultural estate by the powers in being, by prime ministers and cabinet and so on. and then that is something of the infringement on human rights. For we did alert the European Parliament and the EU Commission about this, I think, a sort of chain of production from agriculture to the breakfast table in England and so on. I think, and we could do much more in the advocacy to protect the rights defenders and so on. But the problem is not only about the big corporations international. I think the immediate problem is because our respective governments do come under the control of the national corporation as well as the international corporation. And that is also related to the spirit and letters of the FTA and investment protection agreements that all of our countries and government have concluded with major industries and so on. It came from the fact that for the past 50 years, the industrialization processes of our respective countries was based on export-oriented industries, on the industrialization based on export products. And we needed the technology, management know-how, and the capital and so on, and eventually the market. So in that sense, we catered our FTA and investment agreement and the avoidance of double taxation agreements and so on to the interests of the business world, the corporate worlds, both the national ones, the regional one, and the international. But lately, because of this climate change and also increasingly concept of sustainability, economic development, and the corporate social responsibility and so on, corporations around the world now have to be concerned about climate change and sustainability. And hopefully, I think respective governments, parliamentarians and so on, and political parties could take up the negotiation with the investor countries and the corporates around the world to arrive at a more balanced economic development whereby the business interests are protected. But I think the livelihood of small farmers, fishermen, small business SMEs, and protection of the environment become the name of the game, and no more about business profit to the detriment and to the losses of the livelihood of ordinary people and to the destruction of the environment. And as to the second point, I think it's more about we have to keep on disseminating the ideas, networking, and working together among political parties and reaching out to the public at large. And whichever political parties are in the government, they should not think about their immediate survival, but I think they should go back and review the promises that they have promised the people during the, election campaign and to the first speech by the Prime Minister or President in the Parliament, that they have to carry out what they have promised to the people at large. Thank you.
Thank you. Ibu Mercy.
Okay, thank you. For the question related with the NDC. NDC is nationally determined contributions. This is the documents which stated clearly about the target to reduce the carbon emissions, and we have to submit officially to the UNFCCC, UN on climate change framework secretariats in UN office, UN secretariats. And after we submit the NDC, in the NDC, we have to clearly the main sectors contribute the carbon emissions for the country. So we can categorize for each sectors like energy, industry, agricultural, waste management, transportation, etc. And how much target we have to reduce the carbon emission, carbon dioxide equivalent emissions to be fulfilled, comply to the Paris agreements. The second, we have to transform the NDC into the national law. So we have to ratify the Paris agreements. Now, Paris agreements, when we have already ratified, we have to move to another step, that we have to develop the climate change financial mechanisms to fulfill the Paris agreements based on our NDC documents. So in the climate change financial mechanism, we have to identify per sectors, which sectors contribute the biggest or the most carbon emission. For example, in Indonesia, the biggest one is land use change and forestry. The second is energy. So we have to state clearly the target to reduce the emission and related with the money. Now, because now we in the pandemic COVID-19, so it's gradually we have to put a green budget to fulfill the NDC targets. For example, in energy sectors, we already start with substitute the primary energy from fossil fuel, so we can blending with biofuel, because this is the transitions. The second, we convert the power plant from fossil fuel to renewable energy directly, from fossil fuel to geothermal, photovoltaic, etc. And the third is how to increase, how to scale up the renewable energy year by year to fulfill the NDC of the Paris agreements. I think maybe something like that about the NDC. So the second question related with the how to run our oversight functions, related with the low carbon developments implementations in the national through subnational level. First, we have to identify all the policies, law regulations, budget spending to comply with the target NDC. The second is we have to ensure that all the policy have to implement on the track based on the target NDC. In Indonesia, many constraints related with the awareness in the subnational governments, political willingness to do the carbon development initiative policy. We have a problem with the funding low carbon green development budget. We have another constraints related with the R&D, research and developments. So in Commission 7, every year we put around 5 trillion rupees as endowment fund for the research and developments. So we can push this budget for the green research and development. So can produce like green inventions, and green inventions produce a green product. Green product can generate the green industry, medium enterprise and small enterprise in the fields. And the last is we can create the green job. So we can see the change of the policy making and budget making and how to implement in the field.
Thank you.
And the third, yeah.
If you could,
sorry,
Ibu Mercy, sorry to interrupt. If you could wrap it up in the next couple of minutes, because we are going to be running over time.
Yeah, I think it's that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I'm so sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, it's okay.
And we could have I think, talked about this for a very long time, but unfortunately we are running out of time. So, we're going to have to end the event in a couple of minutes. But I'm really hoping that, this rich discussion that we just had over the last 90 minutes will sort of inspire people who are listening to this now or perhaps later in really trying to push for this transition. Before we have our closing remarks, I think I just want to very briefly sum up some of the key points in that, it is not just moving to a green economy, transitioning to a green economy is not just a good thing to do for ASEAN countries, it's a necessity, because we're talking about losses that would be much more, magnitude more than what we have seen with COVID-19 if we don't do anything. Like all of our speakers have emphasized, political leadership is key and it's critical, and so is raising awareness among the general public and making sure that we bring into the discussion people who are actually affected by the impacts of climate change. And I think it's, the speakers, particularly in the panel, have really emphasized that the need for a fairer system and not just be captured by the commercial interests, so that there is a more balanced economy. And there are, practical things that can be done. And you can see that, the report that's being launched today, you will see what other countries have done that you can then, pick it up and use them as inspirations, hopefully, for your countries and your party. And like, Kun Apichai said in the chat box, green parties are doing very well now in Europe, and perhaps ASEAN in the next few years will too. And this report could play a role in making that transition. Now I would like to invite Dr. Axel Newbert, who is the resident representative from the Hans Seidel Foundation. APHR would also like to thank the foundation for its support in conducting this research, publishing the report, and also organizing this event. Dr. Newbert?
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished member of the Parliament, we have reached the end of today's webinar. My name is Axel Neubert. I'm the regional representative of the Hans Seidel Foundation. The Hans Seidel Foundation is a German NGO. Our mandates comes directly from the German Federal Parliament, which was just recently re-elected. The cooperation between us and the German Parliament and the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights is one of our most important pillars in Southeast Asia and an excellent example for our work and scope. The motto of our foundation is in service of peace, democracy, and development, and this mission very much applies to our event here. On behalf of the Hans Seidel Foundation, first, I would like to take the opportunity to thank our partners, the Asian Parliamentarian of Human Rights, for organizing this event. Second, I would like to extend my respect and gratitude to our guests and participants. In particular, I would like to thank our distinguished members of parliaments in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand for representing their countries. The participation in this event is very much appreciated. Third and last, I would like to highlight that the COVID-19 crisis is a global crisis. Since more than 2 years now, we are in crisis mode. As vaccination numbers are rising all over the world and also in ASEAN, we might be at the edge of the turning point. At the very least, we see the light at the end of the tunnel. For an economic and social recovery, therefore, it is very important to make the right decision now. Without doubt, the success of this webinar and this event has indicated that Southeast Asia can build back better. Yeah? However, the region's response must be very sufficient and effective. And of course, we need to value experience from our partners and other countries. This webinar has given a valuable input on green and sustainable recovery. It has given a valuable recommendation for policymakers in Southeast Asia. This recommendation you can also find on our website and our partner websites for further reference. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm convinced that this event has highlighted challenge and solutions facing this very important topic. Before I close this event officially, I want to say one more on behalf of the Untitled Foundation and the organizers. Thank you very much for your interest and your participation in this event. I wish you all success and a very good afternoon and evening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Newbert. And there we have it. Thank you so much to our speakers. I'd like to, reiterate the call made by Dr. Newbert. Thank you very much to all our speakers for taking time off their busy schedules to speak at this event. Can we give them a virtual round of applause? And of course, a thank you to the audience as well for your participation. I hope this event has inspired you, and I wish you all the best for the rest of the week. Goodbye.